Welcome to another deep dive, everybody. Today we'll be tracing the fascinating story of how ancient humans made their way to East Eurasia.
Really quite a journey when you think about it.
Absolutely. And to guide us, we'll be using a recent research article straight out of the Journal of Physiological Anthropology. It's titled Human Dispersal into East Eurasia, Ancient Genome Insights, and the Need for Research on Physiological Adaptations. Sounds pretty intense, right?
Yeah, it is a bit technical, but thankfully we also have a great summary article to help us break it down for,
For the non-scientists among us, like me.
Exactly.
So think of this deep dive as a detective story. We're piecing together clues, but instead of finding a criminal,
We're tracing the footsteps of our ancestors, figuring out how they adapted and survived some pretty crazy conditions.
seriously, ice ages, encounters with other human species.
Talk about an adventure.
Okay, so let's set the stage first. For a long time, scientists were locked in this big debate about human origins.
Right, there were two main camps. The multi-regional evolution folks, who believed humans evolved in multiple places around the world simultaneously.
And the Out of Africa crew, who believed everyone originated in Africa and then migrated out.
Exactly. Now, the multi-regional evolution theory, it had some appeal.
Yeah, I remember learning about it in school. Like, there was some fossil evidence that seemed to back it up, right?
Right, especially in Asia, some fossils suggested a continuous line from those archaic humans to the modern populations in those regions.
So how'd we finally figure out who was right? Was it like a scientific showdown?
Well, not quite a showdown, but mitochondrial DNA or mtDNA really changed the game.
mtDNA. Refresh my memory on that one.
Sure. So basically, every time a mother has a child, she passes down a little bit of her own DNA, like a unique signature.
Okay, I'm following.
And over generations, these signatures accumulate, creating a trail we can follow back in time.
A genetic breadcrumb trail.
Exactly. And when researchers analyzed mtDNA from different populations around the world,
They hit the jackpot.
they found that everyone alive today can actually trace their ancestry back to a single woman who lived in Africa roughly 200,000 years ago.
Wow. They even gave her a nickname, right?
Yep, mitochondrial Eve. Catchy, isn't it?
Mitochondrial Eve, the mother of us all. But mtDNA wasn't the only piece of the puzzle, was it?
Nope. The Human Genome Project, along with other massive genetic studies, revealed that African populations have the greatest genetic diversity.
Makes sense, right?
Yeah.
The longer a population has been in a place, the more diverse their genes become.
Exactly. It's like a library. The older it is, the more diverse the collection of books.
So Africa is like that ancient library full of genetic stories waiting to be told. But our ancestors didn't just stay put, did they?
Oh, definitely not. They were natural-born explorers, venturing out of Africa and, get this, meeting other human species like Neanderthals and Denisovans.
Wait, hold up. Are we talking ancient hookups here?
Well, yeah, and these encounters weren't just fleeting flings.
You're telling me they had a lasting impact?
Oh, absolutely. Genetic analyses show that modern humans outside of Africa still carry a bit of Neanderthal DNA. And guess what? East Asians actually have even more than Europeans.
Wow. So what, did we inherit their fashion sense or something?
Not quite. But some of these genetic souvenirs from our ancient cousins turned out to be pretty useful.
Okay, now I'm really intrigued. Spill the tea. What kind of advantages are we talking about?
Well, take the EPAS1 gene, for example.
EPA1. Sounds familiar.
Right. We talked about it earlier. It's the one we inherited from Denisovans.
Ah, right. The high altitude one.
Exactly. It helps regulate red blood cell production, which is super important in places like the Tibetan Plateau, where oxygen is thin. Without it, your blood thickens, your heart struggles, and things can get pretty bad.
So basically, thanks to a little prehistoric mingling, Tibetans had this built-in advantage that helped them conquer those massive mountains.
Precisely. But how our ancestors actually got to those far-flung places like East Asia? Well, that's a story for another time.
Ooh, cliffhanger. All right, everyone, stay tuned for part 2 of our deep dive. We're exploring those migration routes, the challenges they faced, and maybe even uncovering some more genetic surprises along the way. Last time, we were talking about those crazy adaptations that helped early humans tough it out through the Ice Age. But now, picture this. They're not just dealing with the freezing cold.
They're climbing mountains, too.
Reaching places like the Himalayas.
And the Tibetan Plateau.
Talk about taking survival of the fittest to a whole new level. Thin air, extreme cold, intense UV radiation from the sun.
And don't forget the limited food sources.
So how did they do it? Was that Denisovan gene, that EPAS1, was that enough to help them survive?
It was definitely a huge factor, yeah. Remember, EPAS1 helps regulate red blood cell production, which is crucial at high altitudes where oxygen is thin.
Right, right.
Without it, their blood would have thickened, making it harder for the heart to pump, leading to all kinds of health problems.
So a little prehistoric interbreeding basically gave Tibetans a genetic leg up, helping them conquer those sky-high peaks. But was EPAS1 the only trick they had?
Oh, no way! Evolution is all about picking the best traits for a specific environment.
Makes sense.
Researchers actually found that Tibetan women with wider left ventricles in their hearts, that's a part of the heart, had better reproductive success at high altitudes.
Yeah.
Meaning that over generations, natural selection favored the folks who were best suited to those oxygen-thin conditions.
It's like nature was playing matchmaker, making sure those with the best traits for high-altitude living passed them down to their kids. Okay, but let's switch gears for a sec. We've talked a lot about Denisovans. What about those Neanderthal genes we inherited? What role did they play?
Neanderthal DNA might be a smaller part of our genome overall, but those genes weren't just along for the ride. They actually provided some important benefits as our ancestors ventured into new environments.
Like what? Do they, I don't know, make our ancestors stronger or something?
Well, not exactly stronger in the traditional sense, but they did help us fight off new diseases. For instance, the OAS genes, which help our immune system fight off viruses, show signs of Neanderthal ancestry.
So those ancient encounters might be protecting us from viruses even today.
Exactly. And get this. Some recent studies suggest that certain Neanderthal-derived OAS gene variants might even be linked to protection against severe COVID-19.
Whoa, that's crazy. Talk about a blast from the past impacting our health today. But wait, did you also mention that some Neanderthal genes were linked to metabolism?
You've got a good memory. Researchers found that Neanderthal alleles related to lipid catabolism, that's the breakdown of fats, were positively selected in Europeans.
Okay, so these genes could have influenced how our ancestors stored and used fat. But didn't you say earlier that some of those ancient adaptations might actually be hurting us in our modern world?
You're catching on. It's this idea of mismatched genes. Traits that were once super helpful in one environment but kind of backfire in another. Well, think about the thrifty gene hypothesis.
Thrifty genes, what are those?
So the idea is that certain genes helped our ancestors survive famines by making them really good at storing fat.
Okay, I see.
Back then, that was a lifesaver. But today, in our world of, well, lots of food and not much physical activity, those same genes might be why we struggle with obesity and other health issues.
It's like our bodies are still in survival mode, even though we don't need to be anymore. So are we just, like, stuck with these ancient genes, or are we doomed?
Not at all. We can't change our genes, but we can change our habits.
That's true.
By understanding our evolutionary history and those mismatches, we can make smarter choices about our diet, how active we are, and the environment we live in.
So it's not about blaming our ancestors, but using the knowledge of our past to make better choices today. Okay, that's empowering. But before we get too ahead of ourselves, we've mapped out these major migration routes, but
the details are still pretty fuzzy.
yeah, like were there multiple waves of migration out of Africa? How much interbreeding happened between different groups?
And what about those less well-known populations that might have contributed to the genetic makeup of East Asia?
It feels like we've sketched out the outline of a portrait, but we're still missing all those fine details, the nuances, the depth.
All right, welcome back, everyone, for the final part of our deep dive into human dispersal in East Eurasia. We've been on quite the journey, haven't we? Tracing those ancient footsteps all the way from Africa to some of the most extreme spots on Earth.
It's pretty mind-blowing when you think about it. The resilience of our species, the adaptability.
For sure. We've uncovered ancient hookups with Neanderthals and Denisovans, and how those encounters, well, they still impact us today.
They really do.
But I gotta ask, what does all this tell us about human nature, about us?
You know, I think it really highlights our capacity for innovation, our drive to explore and push those boundaries. Our ancestors weren't just content to stay in one place.
Yeah, they were always on the move. Always seeking out new opportunities, adapting to new challenges. It's pretty incredible.
It's like we've got wanderlust built into our DNA or something. But here's something I've been wondering. If our ancestors were so good at adapting, why are we facing so many health problems today?
That's a great question. And it really gets to the heart of what we call the mismatch hypothesis. You see, our modern world, with all its processed food, technology, and, let's be honest, comfy couches.
Not to mention those tempting takeout apps.
Exactly. It's created this disconnect between our genes and our environment, those adaptations that once kept us alive, like storing fat efficiently.
Which was super useful back then.
Absolutely. Now they might be working against us, especially in a world where we don't have to hunt for our next meal.
It's like our bodies are stuck in the Stone Age, still programmed for a world that doesn't really exist anymore.
Right.
So what can we do about it? Are we just like victims of our evolutionary past?
Not at all. We can't change our genes, that's true.
Yeah.
But we can change our behavior
Okay, I like where this is going.
by understanding our evolutionary history, by recognizing those mismatches. We can make better choices
Choices
about our diet, how much we move our bodies, and even the environment we choose to live in.
So it's not about blaming our ancestors, but about learning from them.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
about using knowledge of our past to make smarter decisions in the present. It's empowering, really.
It is. Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive, I'm left wondering about the future. What does our evolutionary past tell us about where we're headed?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? We can't predict the future, but I do think our past gives us some clues. Our ancestors, they were incredibly adaptable.
Yeah, they were survivors.
And that suggests we've also got the potential to evolve and thrive even when facing huge challenges.
Like climate change.
Pandemics, who knows, even space exploration. The human story is still being written, and we're not just along for the ride, we're the authors.
I love that. Well, folks, it looks like we've reached the end of our deep dive into human dispersal in East Eurasia. It's been quite the journey, wouldn't you say?
It really has. We've covered so much ground, those ancient migration routes, the impact of Neanderthal and Denisovan genes.
We've seen how our ancestors braved some of the toughest conditions imaginable and how those adaptations still influence us today. It's amazing to think about the power of evolution and how connected we all are, really.
It is. And as you go about your day, just remember you carry the legacy of countless generations within you, a story that began in Africa and continues to unfold with every step you take.
That's a beautiful thought. So to everyone listening, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and never stop being curious about the incredible tapestry of human history. And until next time, stay curious.